Legislators listen to superintendents. Legislators listen to superintendents. Please take a few minutes to make sure that you're advocating for these important programs. Just while Shelley was up here, he'd be embarrassed, but Shelley is a recent author of 2 national articles that were sponsored by the Aspen Institute, From a Nation at Risk to a Nation at Hope, and they're 2 articles on the social, emotional, academic development of students. So again, Massachusetts is being represented well all across the country, and so Shelley, congratulations on your recent publications. We have a great panel. It's meant to continue the conversation that we just had. Again, it's not about money, it's about what we end up doing with that money, what's next in Massachusetts. I know this is an important theme to the commissioner. Commissioner's been out listening across the state this year. I believe in March is it 19th, sir? March 19th, he is having a gathering at UMass Amherst from lots of different constituents to talk about what's next in Massachusetts. So we are trying to hone our message to make sure, again, superintendents will be represented there, that we make a case so that we can create the environment and have the courage to make some of these systemic changes and school-based changes that we see are going to be best for kids going into the future. And whether that's as an organization for us advocating for an ESSA waiver right away, for us to get some flexibility to allow districts to rethink how we talk about student success. I think we need to make sure that when we ask something, that we're asking concretely. To the commissioner's credit, he is asking us, and if we don't respond, shame on us. So I think we need to do that. That response today is with our panel. We have Diane Kelly from Revere, Andy Calkins, Shelley you heard from, Shelley Berman, and we have Anna Nolin from Natick. The whole reason I'm up here as facilitator is I'm not going to say anything. Tom felt really bad for me, so I'm actually going to fade out, but Andy was our keynote, is going to sort of facilitate the conversation, and it's honestly meant to be a conversation. This isn't about what magic is happening in all of our districts, because there is magic happening in all of our districts. Schools are optimistic places. This is just for us to continue the conversation and for allow you all to interact. So with that, Andy, I'll turn it over to you in our august panel.
And aren't they so august looking, especially Diane, who is putting us all to shame, having just come back from some exotic paradise island somewhere, totally outing her.
One other thing, I'm not sure I officially introduced the commissioner. Commissioner Riley has agreed to join us as well. So,
let's talk about the charge that I laid out in this talk this morning, about what it would take for Massachusetts to become the first state that is doing this at the level of a state community, a state ecosystem. There are schools nationally and here that are doing it. There's a handful of districts that are showing the way. There is not yet a state that is doing this deliberately, explicitly as a statewide action and really showing results in progress and change, statewide in most, if not every community. So what's everybody's emotional state following my talk? What part confidence and what part vulnerability are you feeling about your state's readiness to do this in a meaningful way and in our lifetimes? And Anna, should we start down here with you and just go this way?
Well, sure. My emotional readiness is great. Thank you for asking. But I do think that there are tools within our state that allow us to be poised to take this on at the state level. I would suggest to you that our coordinated teacher evaluation tools that we use have deep penetration in many districts, not all. And for me, your slide, the yeah but slide, and principle number 3 around the real linchpin for this, and at least in our work in Natick, is re-educating the adults about how to experience learning as it is today, and then provide those learning experiences for kids. If they can't match up what they're expected to deliver with something that they have experienced in their own social and learning modes, it's much harder for them to create that scale. So over the past few years, I've certainly been advocating with the former DLAC committee to create things like competency-based micro-credentials associated with the Department of Education and tied to things like aspects of the teacher evaluation rubric. For instance, if we chose diverse assessments as a place where we really put robust and personalized learning in as a matter of course for every teacher, teachers could recertify and could experience their own self-driven learning while they were unified with the state. There are ways, there are tools that we already have that could help us with these next generation learning principles for teachers. But also, we have to invest in teacher training programs that start the pipeline from the get-go. And Natick has been in its third year with the Woodrow Wilson Institute and MIT, training teachers in the STEM field using artificial reality tool called Immersion, not unlike what Andre was talking about, the simulation piece that Teachers 21 uses to train superintendents and principals, but to train teachers, a flight simulator, if you will, for classroom expectations. And those teachers also do not hop through teacher training semester by semester. It's competency by competency. So if you have someone who has mastered certain competencies, they don't waste 6 months doing coursework in something they already have demonstrated competency in, which these are the environments we're seeking to create for our own students. So we're trying to train teachers in that way and make sure that that they're allowed to have agency, choice, respect for the talent they already have, and training for the areas in which they want to grow. And just my own research in terms of deploying technology initiatives in the state, which has been a big sea change for many, it doesn't necessarily indicate this type of teaching, just because technology has been deployed in schools, is that superintendents and the way they frame these initiatives is the change maker. So while we can hold hands on a lot of things in the state, it really is about how the superintendent creates that social movement. So your last slide, the will to inspire does lie with us. And so we have to ask ourselves, have we immersed ourselves in the type of personalized, competency-based learning as adults that we are expecting from our teachers and our kids?
Thank you. Great. Shelley.
You know, Andy, I'm relatively optimistic about our potential, actually. I served for 14 years in Hudson, Massachusetts, and then I went out of state. And I've served as a superintendent in Louisville, Kentucky, and in Eugene, Oregon. And returning to Massachusetts is just a gift to be back here and to be back in a community of educators that really are on the cutting edge. There's a lot of struggle that goes on in this country, and when you get out of Massachusetts, you begin to realize how much we have gained over the last 25 years of education reform, and how much we do together and how cohesive of a group of superintendents we are and assistant superintendents, and how aggressive we are at moving change forward. So I come back with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of excitement. I'd like to share at some point what we're doing as part of that. We're all on a journey, and recognizing that this is a collective journey is an important piece. And when I look at some of the initiatives like the Maple Consortium, that's school districts that have pulled together to say, how do we do personalized learning well? When there's another set of districts that are looking at capstone projects, and there's a capstone consortium. There's a whole variety of, I think, learning networks for ourselves that help us move forward. And I think we have an association that is on the cutting edge as well. I will say that the key is going to be the Department of Ed, and I'm glad that Jeff is here to articulate that. But when I look at the district's, the department's website, and I see what goals they've set out, they're very consistent. I was struck by your comment about the commitments in redefining student success, and they're all about social justice, equity for complex learners, social learning, and social responsibility. I mean, that's echoed in the department's website. It's echoed in most of our mission statements. I think we resonate with those words and with that commitment. And I know, having heard the commissioner speak on a number of occasions, he is equally committed to those values. So we have the base. Now, the key is, can we experiment? Can we provide ourselves with the opportunity to stretch ourselves and to explore new terrain and to support us in the risk that takes? And when we fail, is that okay? Because I've experienced enough failure that I can say it's helpful to have somebody bring you back up and say, okay, let's try another strategy, and let's see if we can work it a different way or what we can learn out of that.
Yeah. Great. Thanks. Diane.
So I would just echo what Anna and Shelley already said. I guess what I would add to those comments, I think the piece about the state partnering with us is really critical. I know that we're all experimenting in these areas. Every district, every superintendent I talk to from every district across the state is doing something around personalized learning or performance assessments or core values documents or envisioning what a graduate will look like. We've all got a hand in this work, which is really encouraging in terms of, is this state going to be able to push the initiative forward? I'm really encouraged in that direction, and I think the critical leverage point at this point is how the state partners with us around these ideas, and I've been really encouraged with Jeff's leadership and the things that he said publicly about where he sees education in Massachusetts going. The one nuance that I think we really need to think of as a state and as superintendents is the piece about adult learning being as important as student learning. Most of us don't have time in the teacher day for adult learning, and that's going to be a stumbling block until we can figure that out so that all teachers have part of their workday focused around their own job-embedded professional development so that we can really up their skill set in their toolbox around these ideas.
Great. Commissioner.
My mental status, tenuous.
Did I mention I just got back from a week in Jamaica? Social emotional health.
You and I live very different lives. I was, really pleased to hear a lot of Andy's words today because we are at a point where we need to rethink where we're going. And what I see, however, is the roadblocks. There is institutional inertia that does not want to change. And the only way things are going to change is if people come to agreement on what needs to change. And so what I would say is the will is key to this, and the need to kind of iterate and do models and have people try different things is crucial. But at some point, that has to turn into a coherent plan where we bring this together to kind of chart our way forward. And the one area where I don't think we spend enough time is in the ability of people to share best practices with each other. And that, by the way, is not just at the district superintendent level, but I'm talking at the school level amongst teachers, to share great lessons, to share impactful tasks, to share things that work. We know we've got achievement and opportunity gaps. Okay, great. Not too many people have talked to Paul Ash about what they've done in Lexington to close those gaps, which are pretty significant, right? We need to find the time and space to share those things. And I owe you a phone call, I know.
Good. So let's follow that with a request to each of you. We'll start with Diane and go this way, and then keep winding. You'll be our cleanup hitter for all these questions, okay? You're going to be like Big Poppy for all of us, okay? Maybe we should start calling. No, never mind. So here's the offer to you. This, again, is one of those polarity thinking things where we say, well, this has got to happen really from the top down, or no, it's really going to happen from the bottom up. Well, it's going to happen both ways, and there are different roles for both levels to play. And so my invitation to each of you is to choose which one you want to go to. Is there some action from the top, all of the factors, including the state, that help set the conditions that determine the complexity of your job, your journey in making this happen? Is there something you can point at that would be a really important thing for the state or somebody working at the top down to do for you to make this happen? Or choose to go from the bottom up and just say, there is something happening in your district that you think needs to be known more broadly, certainly by your peers here, but potentially with overtones for how this could play out across the state. Take your choice.
So I think I'll go middle of the road because it brings the two together. But one of the things that I was thinking about as you spoke today, and it kind of speaks to the commissioner's point about institutional inertia, is the relationship between superintendents, MASs, the state, the Department of Education, and our teachers' unions. Because I feel like in the last couple of years, we're a mass MTA district, I feel like the tone has changed to a less collaborative, let's work together, let's find solutions kind of mentality, and that worries me as we try to introduce change, because those are the kinds of mindsets that I think lead to institutional inertia, when some people are really looking for just what's the problem, how can I roadblock this? In Revere, we're fortunate to have a leadership team in our union that isn't that entrenched in the narrative of the MTA. So we've been able to collaborate a lot more, and we do have what we call the Revere Educators Leadership Board, which is a group of teachers and administrators who make the decision-making around budgeting and finance and goals and where we put some money. That's been really important to the work that we've done to try to make change happen in Revere, because we all know that when people design the change, they push for it to be successful. When people are not part of the design, they do the opposite. And so I think that these things all come into place, and when I look at a wider scale of what we're able to do as a state in order to inspire change and really lead people along with the change, that's going to be a critical point, that we renegotiate that relationship with the teachers' unions to more of a functional, collaborative, moving forward together kind of thing. And I don't know exactly who owns the redesign of that relationship, but I think it needs to happen.
Great. Thanks. We might come back to that, because that feels big. Oh, you got one. Okay.
You know, I want to sort of come at this question a little bit differently, Andy. Having just finished, I was working as one of the councils supporting the National Commission on Social Emotional Academic Development. And one of the things that stood out as we talked about, how do you have a campaign that dramatically changes the country and changes the conversation? And that was about social emotional learning, which is a little bit of a different conversation. But one of the lessons and one of the key recommendations is that it's the vision and articulation of leaders that makes a tremendous difference. It's whether we can, as individuals, carry a message that first explains why we're doing that work, and secondly, makes it cohere so that the various elements of that work mean something. I just wanted to, this is one of the struggles that we've gone through. One of the issues is, how do you define personalization? Why personalization, and where are we going with it? And in Andover, we've actually come up with a framework, and we've shared this with our staff. So I'm going to use this as an example. We believe that we want to personalize the environment. And the way to personalize the environment is through social emotional learning. So we have established sort of a context for why social emotional learning is important. At the same time, we want to personalize the curriculum so that each student has choice and access to the curriculum, that they have the on-ramps and can access the curriculum in a personal way. So we've looked at, that's how our work on universal design for learning fits in. And in fact, then to personalize learning itself, it means really being authentic in our learning. What does authentic learning mean? And how do we become accountable for it? Which is the last piece, that our accountability is shifted to what we're calling a new student resume, or literally student documentation of what they have learned. That it's they possess it, they demonstrate it, and share it with others. And we've actually defined what authentic learning is, and I've shared the definition that we use as a district, that it's engages students in collaborative creation of products or solutions that require extended focus over time, match the complex real-world tasks and investigations of practicing professionals, and integrate knowledge from multiple disciplines. So with that framing, we've begun the work. So what I would say is that it is critically important for all of us to begin sharing why this is important, why it's critical. You gave us that speech. Now, how do we make all of our initiatives cohere into something that people can easily understand and say, I see how this all fits together, and I can make sense of it in my classroom?
When you say people,
I mean, not only teachers, our parents, the community at large. We have a local foundation. We take this to the larger community because it's equally important that they understand where we're going and why we're asking for money for doing this work.
I guess I would say one thing that is sort of less theoretical and philosophical, and then I'll say some things that I think are corollary to Shelley's commentary. I think assessments need to change. Assessments, what we assess gets done, how we assess it sets the tone for how we teach and how learning is absorbed. And if the assessments are still the same types of assessments a generation ago, we may be hogtied by our own assessments in terms of how our instruction changes. So to me, I don't see enough competency-based assessments, mechanisms, or assessments that I think really dovetail with a personalized learning approach. So we struggle with that in Natick too. It's often on the table. We hosted with our Director of Digital Learning, Grace Magley, who's here, and certainly our Maple partners figure in big as an innovation hub around how we talk about this, but we had a hackathon for teachers last year where they took various projects and lessons that they were really taking risks in, and they did that sort of autopsy, so to speak. How'd it go? What could we have done? To me, it was the best day of professional learning I've seen anywhere, hands down. And so you dissect what are the critical ingredients there. Honestly, the critical ingredients were exactly what Shelley was saying. If we're going to expect children to learn this way and create the social emotional environment around it to provide the psychological safety so they can, we have to show teachers that same environment. And so I feel we need to invest in teacher teams to develop that ability to take the risks, to do the innovations, and really sustain them that way. And then on the state level, I'm a little bit of a broken record, but if we're going to have mandates for certification, teacher evaluation, and professional development, we need then to offer choice and multiple pathways for those individuals to demonstrate those expectations and to tailor it to the cultural needs. So I'm a good teacher if I can take the expectations from the state, find the right professional development pathway for me, and apply it directly to the needs in my district. So that's not always an easy line to take with our current way of doing business.
we're going to invite Eric to jump in here if you would like.
I can.
He's,
Okay.
he's the essence of self-effacing.
Oh, please.
You know.
Again, I go from the concrete that we need more flexibility at the district level. I also think stability sometimes has a negative connotation, and the districts that I see who are doing remarkable things, the leadership in that district has been allowed to make mistakes, has been allowed to get to know the values of the community, and has been there for a while. Diane, you're Revere, been in Revere, you're committed to the community. I think they know that. Mary, Chelsea, born and bred, went to Chelsea schools. That says something. I'm just looking around the room. Dan's been in Needham. Joe, you've been in, I'm sorry, I'm blanking, Shrewsbury. When we see that, Lisa Dana, Danvers, I see Cindy and Melrose. When I see people, names, when they're committed to a community, that allows that to happen. And the state does have some language that allows districts to turn around. I think they do. There's a reason that there's sort of a receivership or a different level of autonomy and authority when a district is in trouble. And if we're saying that's what's helpful when a district is in trouble, maybe some of that authority and autonomy would be helpful when we're not in trouble. And again, a big part of ed reform 25 years ago that's often forgotten was changes in governance. And so maybe we need to think about that governance a little bit more and allow superintendents to take some risks and not feel like they're going to get tarred and feathered every time they try something innovative.
Enough with the sequencing. Let's just let it all hang out. Anybody jump in and take on this question, which I'm going to phrase innocently, but in this context today, it's going to feel a little loaded. You know, we've heard already expressed in the last 15 minutes up here the crucial importance of teacher involvement in both designing the change and in working through their own mindset changes and really coming to own this in a deep and authentic way. Nationally, we know that you know, the people that parents trust the most aren't, in fact, you all. Surprising though that may be, it's teachers. You know, teachers are like the most trusted. They're right up there next to like the military in terms of most respected, most trusted professions. We need their voice. Their voice has got to be right there next to yours, making this a united sea change. What does it look like for that to be the way the story plays out here, both in terms of your local districts and how you're working with your unions and teacher leaders, as Diane mentioned before, but also just thinking about what this looks like at the state. I mean, is this Eric and Tom calling up MTA and going out and, you know, having a few beers and saying, okay, let's just put all of that behind us and get behind this new thing? What does that look like?
Can we videotape that?
A beer summit, that's what. Jump in, anybody. Yeah, go ahead.
So kind of echoing what Eric had mentioned before about the stability being a precursor to change, and something Anna said earlier about, or it might have been Shelley, I forget now, about leaders being the ones who really drive the change. I think that's what's really important underneath that is trust. And that's where I see a gap right now with the teachers' unions. I think that teachers are feeling vilified, rightfully so, about their own performance and the whole thing we went through with district determined measures. I know we don't use those words anymore, but you know, I think that's what needs to be rebuilt, is the idea that we have faith in our teachers, and the state is doing some of that work with their amazing teacher initiative, and that's helpful, but I don't think that the teachers are in a space yet where they believe this is really going to be the new way. So I think we need to put some energy and some effort into rebuilding and reestablishing that trust. You mentioned that parents trust teachers more than anybody. I think they trust the individual teacher that they know that their child has this year or last year, but their trust doesn't extend globally to the group of teachers in general, or schools in general, or administrators in general, and that's what we really need to work on.
You know, I think there's a tension here. On the one hand, some of the things that we've been doing is we've created innovation teams or design teams at each of our schools for those who are interested to pursue the kinds of authentic learning experiments. We've supported teachers who our capstone projects came out of a teacher initiative, so we've supported the people who are doing this work. We are now in an initiative around looking at a social studies program with actually a number of other districts are working with us. It's an elementary social studies program that's called One Community, One Nation, that combines literacy, arts, and social studies into an integrated curriculum. And we're having teachers literally work on that in a almost crowdsourced way. So that they add resources and generate ideas and share ideas. So that's really necessary. I think Anna's point at the very beginning of this was we have to build teacher capacity. At the same time, there's a tension because we all know that not all teachers are going to be our most creative teachers who are going to launch in and take risks and move this work forward. There are others who feel very secure in what they've done and feel very effective in what they've done and say, what I do currently is really quality education, and believe that, and actually in many ways it is. So moving people forward entails problematizing. It entails raising the questions, and it means engaging people in hard questions and hard data to say, here's what we see, here's the circumstances we're not confronting, how will you address that? And sometimes it takes really just literally creating the vision saying, this is where we're going. This is necessary. It is absolutely necessary that we deal with the achievement gap. It is absolutely necessary that we deal with equity. And how we address that is really important. Even if we believe we're effective, we may not be as effective in certain circumstances. And how do we open that up and study it without saying, oh, well, then we need more teachers or more instructional assistants to take those kids.
So sort of back to underscoring something that Shelley had spoken about, we've really focused, after I've just gone through a 9-month interview process, talk about fun times, it was that there was this piece about trust with teachers related to, did we really understand and recall the risks that it takes to be this kind of teacher? And, our district has focused on the relationships within our district this year, and hopefully moving forward, because we do need to rebuild that trust. A lot of feedback about initiative overload, DDMs being one that has left some scars. Although I'll say to you that in terms of assessment literacy, DDMs did move our teachers along a continuum of learning that nothing else made that happen before. However, in the wake of that, teachers felt like we lost the learning stance about their particular needs, and we lost their feedback about what students are needing in today's classrooms. So we've refreshed our commitment to our teams last night at negotiations. Instead of diving in for the first night on issues in the contract, we talked about defining what co-leadership means for our district. What does it mean for the central office, principals, and teachers to stand together as leaders and to withstand innovation together? The teachers union president said, look, we know we can be flexible around things and changes and new mandates, but we have to have a seat at the table for these decision-making pieces around our environment, and we'll help you grow the pathways. And I'm just trying really hard to keep listening to that voice, because if I want the teachers to do the same for kids, I better model it. I'm trying to do that when I teach graduate classes too. So I do think it's important how we situate the environment and how we prepare the environment. The mandates that come from DESE are really executed and promulgated by us in our districts. It makes meaning and takes hold there. So we can't just blame it up the chain. We have to take those frameworks and make them live and make sense for our district. And to me, that's partnering with the teachers first.
Great. Thanks. Is that okay? We have a few more minutes, and I honestly we talked about hard questions. I wanted some questions from the audience to our panel, to the commissioner. And without, again, fear of risking, I'm going to miss someone, but I would just be remiss without mentioning Kathy Smith from Brockton. Hi, Kathy. Just in terms of stability, commitment to a city, and just your incredible work on the Foundation Budget Reform Commission. So, Kathy, thank you. David.
Thank you, Eric, and thanks to the panel. So a subject that's been, from Wellesley Public Schools, notably absent in the conversation today has been the role of higher education. And in a community like ours, that's probably the most fundamental incentive structure for parents wanting kids to get into college and thinking about a pathway that doesn't mess with the secret sauce. Ironically, with the Common App, our kids are applying to more colleges than ever before, which would seem to create the incentive structure for colleges and their admissions process to look at superficial measures as opposed to things like the Mastery Transcript Project. So, Andy, among your bullet points, as you talked about marshaling the political will and having communities reimagine this, higher ed, which feels like it's behind us in having co-ownership of this, that's a real impediment in a community like ours that, out of context, people say, great, we love the ideas behind project-based learning and a focus on social emotional learning. In context, folks are concerned about the number of AP classes, SAT scores, these very traditional measures. So at least in our community, and I'm guessing in many communities, we're finding that influence of higher education is a significant stumbling block into reimagining this in the ways you described.
It's a really good point. I would say I wouldn't discount the potential impact of Mastery Transcripts work, because there's nobody defending the high school transcript right now. There's there is no self-reinforcing group that's holding on to that and trying to keep it. It's just that everybody is in a self-reinforcing loop around it and waiting for somebody else to make a move. MTC, so those of you who are not familiar with this, go to mastery.org and you'll see this considerable effort that just won some giant global prize for being the most promising innovation systems changing thing of the year. They're trying to redesign the high school transcript, and they've got the interest of the Making Caring Common network of universities and colleges and admissions deans that have said to them, you come up with something that works for our process and it gives us a richer, deeper view of what kids can do, we will use it. I mean, we may have to use both, dually for a while, but we don't have to be convinced about this. You saw my reference to Utah. One way to sort of remove a boulder from the stream and redirect the stream a bit, I think, is for Massachusetts to take the lead in adopting our version of their transcript, because that will send a signal about the kinds of things that we care about, and it will send a really important signal to the parents in your community about the swath of universities and colleges that they care most about, that are not just willing but are actually encouraging the use of that transcript. So totally agree with you on the importance of that problem, and there's at least this one glimmer of light.
Can I respond to that too? Being in Andover, Wellesley and Andover share sort of a common parenting and approach. And one of the things that's worked, and I'm just going to go really fast through to get one slide that I want to pull up for a second. See if I can get there. No, there it is. What we've done is we've begun to say to our parent community and actually both our school committee and our local foundation are incredibly strong advocates and have projected this out, that universities want more than SAT scores and good grades. That if you really want to get into an elite school, you have to have more and you have to demonstrate more. And these are the criteria that we put up for our parents, and they've bought completely into this. We have done more innovative work with their support based on saying that if you want to get somewhere, you need more than. And this is the kind of quality that we can bring to the work that we're doing. So I just want to say that you don't necessarily need a new transcript. What we need is a way to say we're giving kids the empowerment, the self-direction, the kinds of skills necessary so that they can be really successful. And our parent community's really bought into that.
Okay, thank you. We're going to allow for one more question. I just want to take you through the rest of the agenda quickly. So we do have a computer science challenge. We have some students here from middle school in Salem. So again, we always like that activity, so they're coming. The commissioner then is going to follow the students, and we just thought it would be nice and put the commissioner right after the students and right before lunch. So commissioner, you got the prime spot here for your budget presentation. So you will have some time to ask the commissioner questions coming up. But again, we have one more, not to put any pressure on anyone, but one sort of resounding cumulative question that just sums this all up. Oh, excellent. There we go.
Can everyone hear me? Everyone hear me okay? Yeah. My name's Alec Wyeth, Norwood Public Schools. Hi. Andy, thanks for the presentation today. It was a great framework. And looking at some of the clips that you showed, what impressed me was the amount of innovation that's happening outside of Massachusetts. And so it caused me to wonder, what is it about New England that is where this isn't the hub of all this innovation? And it does touch on your issue. I think we're suffering under three tyrannies, for want of a better expression. And one of them certainly is the tyranny of the Ivy League mindset and tradition. That is a tyranny that we're kind of working at, and I think your comments recently kind of address that. But the first tyranny that comes to my mind is the tyranny of the MCAS system and the accountability system. And if we want to give our teachers the freedom, the latitude, the flexibility to do these things that we know are best for kids, then we have to let go of that tyranny somehow. We have to give them permission to experiment. When we try things in my district, and I hear it all over the place, it's like that's a barrier to change. It's a barrier to innovation. They don't want to fail. They don't want to look bad in Edwin. You know, when you look at those teacher reports, they don't want to look bad publicly, and they don't want to look bad in the eyes of their peers and certainly their administrators. So this is where I think the state, and if I'm reading the ESSA law right, it gives the states flexibility to do things differently. And we have to take charge of it. We have to seize that opportunity. Provide, as Eric mentioned, more flexibility for our staff to do the things we know are right for kids. And that's the challenge, it seems to me. The other tyranny is this tyranny of parent expectations, which is close to the tyranny of the Ivy League, that mindset. Parents have this mindset of what good education looks like and feels like, and it's old. It's the Model T, and we need to bring them up to the Tesla version of education.
So, Alec, thank you. And again, I would say the hopeful part of this, the optimistic part of this is we are being asked. So the conversation doesn't end today. The conversation will be continuing. The commissioner, again, will be hosting a larger conversation on March 19th at UMass Amherst. And again, I think in all of his presentations, he has been interested in hearing from the field and hearing what our opinions are. So again, we are being asked. Shame on us if we don't answer. And I think we need to answer in a coherent way, and we all need to work together, again, through our roundtables to do that. A couple people asked me about the slide decks here. Shelley, if you'd be willing to share as well. We'll make them all available on the MASS website for everybody, so all the slide decks will be